I was a musician one day, and then just a short years later, I was infiltrating a street gang of black Crips.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casazza, the author of Training with the SEAL. Go check it out on Substack. The first couple of chapters are up. Today's guest has lived a story straight out of a movie, a professional musician turned FBI undercover. He spent nearly 2 years inside the Crips, all while raising a family just minutes away. That case became one of FBI's most successful gang takedowns. Now he's a CEO, author of Life in a Fishbowl, and host of the Tegan Broadwater podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Tegan Broadwater. Tegan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Interesting life. I mean, literally straight out of a movie. They need to make a movie about this.
We're working on it.
It's fascinating. I mean, okay, there's so much I have to ask you, but I want to start with like shifting into that undercover role. How did that happen? How did you turn from musician to FBI undercover? And then, we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, it is kind of a 180 career-wise, but I was actually a professional musician and touring and had a bunch of, music students and stuff like that was paying my bills, and just grew really weary of the industry, traveling with five dudes in an 87 Suburban and, sharing two beds at a Days Inn in Oklahoma City or wherever we were going. I grew weary of the industry itself, not of the music or the processes or anything like that. And then had a kid in 95. And that's what really spawned the desire for some kind of change. And at the time, I'd been a musician and an inspiring musician starting from fourth grade, and then worked my way through music school and becoming a professional. So I never even fathomed anything else. I had a kind of a side gig that I used to do on weekends when I was in town, and these cops used to come watch us play. And so when I mentioned to them that I was thinking about a career change, they convinced me to cut 8 inches of locks off and join the police department, which I thought was completely whack at first. But it sounded exciting also. Being a creative, I also thought it would be an interesting match. I still have kind of a type A, but I'm a creative thinker and was traveling with bands that were multicultural bands and stuff. So I was, kind of a peace and love hippie jumping into the police world, which was certainly interesting. Was an advantage in many ways. I was my top driver in my class, top shooter and stuff like that, because I didn't have much experience in any of that. So ultimately, I got in with the goal in mind of getting into undercover work right off the jump, because I just thought I could mesh with different cultures and be a real asset, despite the fact that I'm a big white stiff. And typically that's what they look for. They look for somebody that can assimilate into a particular culture where they're having a drug problem or whatever. If it's narcotics or whatever, then they'll say, okay, this is the Hispanic part of town, this is the black part of town, and whatever. So they're trying to bring people into those units that kind of meet those, match those profiles. I started really working towards learning how to buy dope and learning about the processes, and wrote some letters to try to get permission from the higher ups to learn how to do, serving the dynamic search warrants, and got all of my teams SWAT certified there in the patrol division. And we were able to actually start serving warrants after work for overtime, meshed into this thing where I would come to work and go buy dope all day. And then at night, I'd have a team that was getting off work, and we'd all go crash houses that, where narcotics was too busy to get or whatever. So ultimately, I moved my way into narcotics after the fourth try, actually, because again, I didn't match necessarily anybody's profile, but was proving that I could do it anyway. And it worked on a really bad side of town, purposefully so, just because that's where a lot of the crime is in some of the poor neighborhoods. And in particular, you have neighborhoods that have people in them that are held hostage by gang violence and drug trafficking and prostitution, stuff like that. Whenever you have poor neighborhoods, they're not all bad people at all, but there's an influx of crime in those concentrated areas. So at this particular time, there was a side of town with an area within that side of town that was particularly dangerous and gang ridden. The Crips had taken it over, lots of shootings. Kids couldn't get in and out of there to go to school. They had lookouts. It was kind of a 6 by 6 block square area. Lookouts at one way in, one way out, with lookouts and radios at both sides. And city council and the chief of police even got together and said, how do we fix this because they just had recently had another murder there, and they're like, what do we do? So they were putting their heads together and funded to spare no expense. Let's just start crashing this place, and they were writing warrants and doing jump outs in unmarked vans and pulling people over within any proximity of there that come in and out of there to no avail. I mean, they were going in and hitting warrants and hitting what they call a dry hole where there's nobody there, there's no dope there. They're questioning their own information. And so somebody like me who almost has a blissful ignorance at the time just said, "Hey, I got this magnificent idea," and pitched it to an informant, and then consequently pitched it to my boss. Said, "Hey, look, the only way to really get into this is for me to get in undercover. I'll pose as a big time dope dealer, so I don't have to match a particular profile because I'm big time anyway. I'm just trying to start a new game. I have a source that was busted by the feds in the Austin area, so now I'm moving up into a different city. So I'll kind of appear more as an opportunity." And both of those fools laughed their ass off to start with because, Crips and this and, just seems nonsensical. But nothing else was working. So they let me give it a shot. And that's kind of the impetus of how the whole idea became. I was a musician one day, and then just a short few years later, I was infiltrating a street gang of Black Crips.
Oh my, that's very. So, gosh, there's so many questions with that. But how did you feel though? Because you did mention something that was very interesting. 95, you had your first kid, right?
Yeah.
And now you're going into the police force, right? And shifting careers, and now you're infiltrating the Crips, right? Was that terrifying for you as a father?
That's a great question because it does seem like an oxymoron. Like, hey, you have your kids, so you don't want to be traveling on the road, so you come home and start doing dangerous operations. But my goal was to be present.
Mhm.
I didn't want to miss time. I don't think it was as harrowing going in as it turned out to be by the time the case came to a close. So like I said, I went under a deep undercover operations are kind of rare these days anyway, and this one was nearly 2 years long. I didn't plan on going in that long. I didn't know how deep I could go. I had a group of people that I'd kind of targeted that I thought were going to kind of clean up that whole side of that area. And as far as my kid was concerned and my wife, I'm married. We only lived 25 minutes away. So that's the other super rare part of doing a deep undercover operation is most of the time you don't do them in your own backyard. So literally on
Mhm.
weekends, if you go to the mall, you're likely to run into some of these fools that just took the bus to the same mall and there you are. So we had plan B's and C's for all that kind of stuff too. But and my son was probably 9, 10, 11 years old and
Mhm.
kind of didn't care he was interested in football and basketball and whatever. And I wasn't trying to, paint some kind of heroic picture of myself. So he didn't
Yeah.
really ask questions. So I don't think it was a particularly major issue there at all with him. And like I
Did
said,
it
that
worry
my
you that there's like a chance someone's gonna discover what you were up to, and then you don't make it home one day?
Well, of course. I mean, that's
Yeah.
always the concern. It's an interesting approach. I say it didn't seem harrowing to me, but at the same time, it's one of those things that I assimilate to jumping out of a plane for the first time. You decide that it's something you really need to do, and this
Mhm.
may apply to your show more than anything. But you decide, look, I really need to do this. I'm fighting my own self-conscious here that's telling me it's so much easier to relax and not go through this fire. But once you jump out of the plane, you have to start figuring it out. You're almost in survival mode now, and you're trying to figure out the parachute and you figure out what to do. And that's kind of what I forced myself to do. I knew it would be adventurous, I knew it would be dangerous. I kind of had a plan for how I was going to approach things. I couldn't possibly anticipate everything, and I honestly had my wife on board as far as doing something for maybe a
What a
month or
woman.
two. Yeah, I know. I promised her
Wow.
3 months. I said, "Hey, at worst, this is going to be 3 months." And she's like, "Okay."
In 2 years later, wow. Were you can you say a like real sticky situation that you weren't sure if you were gonna get out of, or like where you were sweating a bit?
Sure. I mean,
And
they
by
were.
the way, talk to us about how you like self-regulated when you were really sweating, if that makes sense.
Self-regulated in terms of just keeping my cool.
Yeah. Something
That's a good,
I
yeah.
don't think I could do.
Well, you probably could because you have a good sense of humor and everything. And really, what I did as I went undercover, my persona was as close to myself as you could possibly imagine.
Right.
Other than the fact that I had to install like a little sociopathic element to the way I think, right? And I had to be a little bit more kind of badass and, insistent upon how I carried myself. I think my mindset was like, look, I'm big time over here. And these guys, by the time I started, going in there and spending a few months in there, then people were clamoring to try to do deals with me because I was spreading money through the hood. And people were like, man, this cat's spending good money and I wanted to make this money. So, it really was a matter of my personality coming up as the hippie musician. Honestly, that's kind of how I responded to things. So, I had the first time somebody started flashing a gun and, eyeballing me, they surround my car when I pull up. And, a few of them didn't recognize me at all. And he kind of lifts his shirt up and shows his pistol and everything. And I've got a gun sitting under my lap because as most people will know, if you think you're going to use a gun and you have it holstered sitting inside of a car, you best be prepared to use that car as your only weapon because you're not getting it in time. He's flashing it and kind of walking around and talking a bunch of stuff to me, and I turned around looking. I'm like, man, you're a fool. You don't even know who you're talking to. I really had sold myself on the fact that, this is the ignorant kid. I'm not the one in danger. He's in danger if he only knew who he was messing with. And that attitude kind of carries over, right? And I think it's still, you're flying at 100,000 miles an hour out of the airplane. You can't afford to let emotions take over and kind of falter. So I think you would do well too. Again, if you used laughter, you'd make some kind of joke about his pants or something like, hey, don't make me run because I know you'll trip out of those pants as soon as you take your third step. Whatever it is, you're funnier than I am. But if you rest on your personality in that case, that's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to be memorizing anything or trying to put on some kind of front.
Did you run into anyone outside of that? Like you said, you live 5 minutes away. How did that work? And how did you, I mean, you did mention you have a B and a C plan and stuff. Did you have to go to a D plan or like on the spur of it? And if so, how'd you come up with that?
It's case by case, obviously, when you're dealing with Crips. We ended up arresting 51 people at the end of this thing. So I was dealing with a whole bunch of different people. In practice, you've heard of the term heat run. So I would make heat runs 3 and 4 different times on my way home as just a standard practice. So essentially, you pull out of this place that you just did your deals with, and then you hang a right, and then you hang another right. You're checking your six the whole time. You hang another right, and then you hang another right. If somebody's still on your tail by the time you've made a square, you have an issue. So I was doing that and then leaving the neighborhood, and then I'd get a few miles down the road, get off the freeway, do another heat run, and I just did those throughout. There was only one instance where I got close to home. I wasn't all the way there. I was probably 3/4 of the way home and had my tunes cranked up. I felt like I was in a safe place. I was on my side of town, wow, in terms of distance. And my rear window got shot out as I was driving. And I thought, that scared the hell out of me, obviously. And I pulled my gun like an idiot and start trouncing through this neighborhood, driving 100 miles an hour with my gun out the window, looking for the MFer that's, shooting me or whatever. All of a sudden I'm like, you're not resting on your personality here, son. And that's, how stupid are you anyway? I never did, that was an addition to the book that I added only years later because I thought, man, there was no resolution to that. I never could figure out who actually shot. And I mean, obviously I'm driving at 30 miles an hour down a side street when I got hit. So only the vehicle suffered damage in that case. And otherwise
Your heart
didn't
for a
run into
little
an
bit.
issue.
My gosh.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
god. That is like I don't even know what would be going through my mind with the bullet goes through the oh my
It
god.
pisses you off because you think, wait a minute, somebody's trying to actually shoot me. Hell no.
Oh my
So
now okay, was there times when you were going a little bit stir crazy because going from 3 months to 2 years and not knowing when an end game is in sight, and how did you, like, keep sanity throughout?
That was the job of my wife ultimately, although that's not the job I assigned her. It was 24/7. I mean, I started it in the municipal department, Fort Worth Police Department, started in the narcotics unit, moved to the gang unit because this is a gang case. I just used dope. It wasn't like arresting a bunch of dope dealers. This was, solidified Crips here. She was super stressed and she had a regular job, and I'd get a call at 1:30 in the morning and say, "Yo, T, man, I'm coming back. I got a few keys of blah, blah, blah. It's good stuff. Just getting back from Waco. I'll be there in an hour." And I'd hop up out of bed and go do this deal. And so she would hop out of bed also and sit in the living room with a blanket and watch crime shows until I could get home because she couldn't sleep, and then I'd come home at, 4 or 5 in the morning, and then she'd catch a cat nap and go to work. That kind of stress was multiplied because she was also feeling it and losing sleep, as was I, obviously
Mhm.
feeling it and losing sleep because I was the lone undercover. Before moving to the FBI, I was working, like I said, in the Fort Worth Police Department. So the first 6, 7, 8 months was just me working kind of off the books and just reporting to my boss every week or so what was going on. Once I, got assigned to the FBI, I was still the lone undercover. I just happened to have an agent that was assigned to me to help funnel all these cases into the federal prosecution. I say I acted in as close of character as possible to myself, and I did, but you're still putting yourself in such a juxtaposition in terms of, the culture that you're dealing with, that
Mhm.
I did start developing some accents and using dope terms and gang terms and different things just as I spoke to people. And again, I have these issues that come up and people are drawing guns and I'm having to deal with them in harsh ways that are out of my character. Then I do start bringing some of that stress home. It's this lack of sleep and the constant every day. I mean, I was literally down in the blocks every single day. If I didn't have money to spend, I would go down there and ask for somebody who wasn't there on purpose so that I had an excuse to share a 40 with somebody and talk, or beat somebody's ass at Madden and get street cred that way or something. And she finally pulled me aside. This is many months into it, and just said, "Look, I'm struggling with you and the way you're handling things." I don't even remember what I did. I'm sure what's, marriages are. The biggest arguments are over something menial anyway. I'm sure I responded to something, knowing me, I was probably being a little passive aggressive or a smartass or something. But she said, "Look, you are becoming a man that I don't recognize. You're not the man I married." And those words were like, whoa. She didn't have to lecture me necessarily, but just
Mhm.
saying that helped really check myself. And I asked for her help. Say, "Look, tell me specifically what I'm doing," because that's obviously the last thing I want to do. And by
Mhm.
then, she was also my cheerleader because you get in 7, 8, 9, 10 months and start learning about the progress that you're making. She's not trying to pull the plug and say you need to quit because I'm still trying to get the head of the snake here.
Mhm.
So it was really a team effort, but it really took her drawing a definitive line and saying, "This is a line that I can see you crossing and you're starting to change into someone that I don't like." And that was enough for me to really kind of square back into my personality and try to refocus.
Wow. It's great that you had somebody that was able to check you, and also the fact that you were receptive to it, is really something that sometimes we're, and you did mention, like, you're probably passive aggressive and that, or whatever, but the fact is though that you did accept it and take accountability and realize, like, hey, like, help me,
Yeah.
versus like throwing it away, because yeah, you could definitely I mean, I just see sometimes watching them. That's why I'm very cognizant of what I'm watching, because you end up sometimes embodying the characters that you're seeing on the screen, and
Yeah.
that's a very dangerous game.
It is. Yeah, you're putting yourself in an environment. Just think about saying, "Okay, for the next 2 years, I'm going to hang out with a bunch of idiots and treat them like my friends." How
Mhm.
much that could influence the way you are as a person, Not that all these guys were idiots, but any group of people that are not like you, and to completely change your peer group, that kind of environment changes people. So I was very grateful. It was the last thing I wanted to do was lose my relationship over that.
Oh yeah. Then you did mention something though that I did want to touch on though, in terms of being with these people that you've been around, I thought was kind of interesting when I was reading about you. You built relationships with them, put them away, and then I mean, like you put these people away, but then you built actual relationships with them. Like, how do you handle that moral conflict?
Yeah, I didn't handle it great.
Okay.
I really didn't. I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was. I think part of the problem was I knew I was doing the right thing. But, when you spend enough time with somebody and you start realizing, man, these cats are just like me, except they have, that sociopathic element. Like I said, you cross them,
Yeah.
they'll drive by your house and unload on it, as opposed to, trying to hash it out and figuring out a mature outcome. Which is why they spent a lot of their lives in jail, and most of them didn't have any fathers, and blah blah blah. My hope was, and the disadvantage that I had was, I was the undercover creating this case to say, look, I want to eradicate the violence from these neighborhoods so that these old people who are too poor to just up and move and go to a different place can have a peaceful neighborhood to exist in. I thought, okay, I have my favorites, and I have people that I know damn sure need to go away and stay away. But it ultimately is not up to me. I just make a case and I present the facts and I say, this is what this person did. This is what this person did. The rest of it is contingent upon how much they talk when it comes time to trying to give themselves a break with the feds. Kind of luck of the draw with the judge that you pick too. And at the time, we had a particularly caring judge who I admire to this day and still have a relationship with, and another one who has passed away. So I don't mean to demean him in his passing, but was really hardcore. I mean, it didn't matter who was in front of him. You could be a cop on trial or a bad guy on trial. He was hammering the crap out of you for being in his courtroom. So some of these guys ended up just giving the bird and saying, I'm not talking. And they would draw a bad judge and they would get 22 years. And I'm thinking, man, I would have testified on behalf of this cat's character. And the first opportunity I had, even I did testify on behalf of someone's character and said, look, I know I've put this person in a situation, they've put themselves in a situation, and I've set up this case, but I do feel like they have social redeeming value. I know them more intimately than someone would that just showed up and arrested them. And I think once they saw that I was going to back that up and actually hold my word there, a few other people tried to plea out, cooperate, and then I also was willing to testify for them. But ultimately it really comes down to my having no control over who got what kind of penance for this conspiracy, and it was a little bit frustrating seeing some of the guys that I had high hopes for going away with long prison terms. I had no control over that, and I think the emotional toll was pretty intense. I just ending the case after having been doing it every single day all day and burning nights and everything else, just that was an emotional tax that I didn't expect either. It was just kind of a gigantic gorilla off my shoulders, but at the same time kind of depressing. It was a weird feeling. And then on top of that, you see people that you really thought, man, this guy and I could totally hang out if he could just change this little thing. I'm hoping that he learns from this and that he gets out early and that we could, salvage this cat. And to just see guys like that, go off and do 20 years, it was really a killer to my heart. But again, I knew I did the right thing. I didn't question whether I should have done it. I just didn't know how to necessarily manifest that because, I had a few pen pals that I ended up accruing over the years. But for the most part, I don't reach out to these guys. I let them reach out to me because I'm not trying to go out and poke bears. I just have great hopes for them that, hey, if you get out and you have some reconciliation and you've become a new man and whatever, then I wish you nothing but luck. But I don't know if that answers your question or if it just explains how crappy of a job I did in actually dealing with my emotions at the time. I was kind of an emotional wreck for a long while, honestly, after that.
How long?
Easily the first year. I mean,
Oh,
when we went to go round people up, we had 52 people set to be arrested and only got 27 on day one because you can't get everybody. So then dealing with people that are on the run for a better part of 3 and 4 weeks, death threats coming in, my
I was
kid,
gonna say, like, now your cover is blown. Were you like, I gotta move?
I felt like I had to move. We didn't stay at home. No one stayed at home unless I was there. And if we went places, we went as a family. In the worst kind of way that you have to go as a family because nobody can do anything independently. But on top of that, again, it
For
was
how
just the
long was that,
emotional.
by the way? Like, did you?
That was off and on for a year or two,
Okay.
really, because most of the death threats came from family members and friends of the folks that went in. So even after they got secured and tucked away, there were lots of concerns. And to this day, I have the same phone number. So if they all have my number, I'd rather know that I got a threat coming than
Yeah.
to just put my head in the sand when it comes to that, because I have people I'm responsible for other than myself. So it
Right.
was
Yeah.
it was bad then. I think today it's turned around. I think people realize that my heart was in the right place, and a lot of them have come around and done good things. I've helped out some of the family members with with the kids that were left, and helped them on Christmases. There was whatever, not as a pity thing, but as truly just a way to try to show that this isn't just about putting human beings in prison. That's not what it's about. That's part of a long-term solution, which had to be done. But I think people now that the book's been out and all that kind of stuff understand that my motivation wasn't just to be some kind of idiot cop that want to go make a bunch of arrests.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like it was emotional. You had a lot of emotions for it. You really cared. You built relationships with people, but you did say something that was interesting. Is like it's just business, really. It's like this is the case. This is the job, and this is what I signed up for. So I have to take my emotions out of it, which is so ironic because today I had a business meeting with. I run a nonprofit, and I had a meeting with my consultant, and I mentioned this little situation I'm going through with um, another company. We partnered together for a
Mm.
fundraiser, and there's a lot of miscommunication going on. I tried to back out and all this stuff, and I'm like, it's in 2 months. Like, I don't know. He goes, you're done. Like that's it. I'm like, oh, I feel the relationship done. There's no relationship in the business. Like you've done what you could. You got to take that emotion out of it. And
Right.
and I think that no matter what we do, no matter where, I mean, now you're a CEO and all stuff. You have to take the emotion out of it, and that's extremely challenging because we are emotional creatures. We're human beings,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah.
And honestly, I'm similar to you in that way because I also feel like you can only look at it with that lens after you've exhausted the emotional investment. Because if you're
Mhm.
talking about a partnership or an employee of yours or whatever, you have to try to make every effort to remedy it or help them understand or set them on the right path or whatever it is. But you're right. Once it's done, you also have to understand we're no longer thinking about you and me. We're thinking about how this affects the business. And
Right.
so ultimately, that's the exact same thing as I was looking at. Like, this is about salvaging a neighborhood. And so it's not about me, it's not about them, it's not about their families, but hopefully, as collateral, you end up with potential that are left here because now people are, able to actually make their own way. And it's the same with a business. You got to cut it where you cut it, but I appreciate you because there's a lot of people that would not tolerate putting up with anybody having, an emotional issue or troubles or whatever. If you reach a point where you can't do anymore, then it is what it is, right?
Yeah, that's it, right? Until it
Yeah.
isn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
And I'm curious because gang culture, there's there's a lot of loyalty within gang culture, right? And
Mhm.
there is that hierarchy, right? That leadership hierarchy. There's that hustle. You know, do you find that did you learn anything from it in a positive that you might have take to apply to running a business today? Or do you think that there was anything from it that you might have gotten?
Well, structurally, yes, they have a lot of things going for them in terms of hierarchy. Yes, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily beat what a business has because it's kind of the same way. And honestly, I think in modern business, people are trying to do away with so much hierarchy anyway. I think the key that you brought up is really what I would say was the most impactful is to see that in a business, it's really difficult to try to elicit the right kind of loyalty because that's only deserved after you have earned it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
just because I hired you don't doesn't mean you have to be loyal to me. But if you can start creating the culture and at least as you start bringing other people on. We have like 75 employees, so it can get complicated. But as long as you have enough people that are bought into the idea that we're doing this for the better good, so that all of us can thrive, then you're better off. And I think loyalty is what we're missing more and more and more today. The folks that we hire just feel like they're just trying to figure out what they want to do from here to there, and thanks for at least being the stopgap, but there's no real appreciation for where they are or anything like
Right.
that. So all that does for me, it doesn't make me look down on them as much as try to change their experience to where I can convince more people to look at where they are differently and say, look, we're perhaps there is a path for you here, and these are the type of people that have succeeded here, and perhaps you can be somebody like them too, and this is a path that you can take. And I think it's the same way in the gang culture. It's a hell of a lot more cutthroat there. I think when they finally break and they end up telling on each other and everything, I think that's human, though. I don't think that's even a knock on them. I think if you're comparing that to a business or anything, like you said, you do hit a wall, and eventually you got to lay off people or whatever. I mean, people are going to do what they need to do to keep the business surviving. And I just think that the difference there is that the right kind of leaders are going to do it for the sake of the business survival, not the sake of their own survival. And I think once it comes down to really looking at these Crips, they're looking at something that is so much more significant than losing their job. I mean, these guys are looking at, hey, do you want to cooperate? And we'll talk about potentially 12, 13 years in prison, or would you like to not cooperate? And you got this judge and you're looking at 30. That's kind of a significant deal. So, expecting them to stay tight-lipped it's still something that some of them do, but for the most part, when somebody feels like, well, this is going to be, a difference of 20 years of my life, and I only have so much life, then you kind of understand where they're going to break. And I think most business people would break long before that.
how how would you say you can increase loyalty within your employees in a business?
Several different ways, but I think primarily what you do is you provide them active engagement. You provide opportunities, but not just by saying, hey, if you do this, then you can promote. If you do this, you can whatever. But we try our best to engage indirectly or directly as much as we can without, prying too far, to get to know people on a personal level so that
Hmm.
we understand context too. Sometimes, as the employer, you're getting somebody that come in and like, oh, Sam's late again. This has been 4 times in the past month and a half, and you could sit there and just fret about it or say, okay, well, he only has 2 more knocks until he gets the boot or whatever it is. Or you can come up to Sam or send one of your leaders who knows Sam much better to where Sam feels comfortable, and actually ask if there's anything going on that we can help with, instead of approaching it like, hey, I see
Hmm.
you've got this tardy issue or this whatever issue, this deadlines are not being met or whatever. Find out if there's context. And that's where I think the human element is often missed. So, we truly care about the people that work for us, and we want them to feel like we do
Right.
as owners. There's a difficult little moat in the middle of that. Some people are not going to understand certain things, and I get it. But in principle, if you really do show demonstratively that you care about them as people, I think that goes a long way in terms of loyalty.
Hey, quick pause before we dive back in. You know how we talk about building resilience, confidence, and mindset? There's a nonprofit helping kids do exactly that. Every mission starts with a story, but right now, 1 in 3 kids in America feels like they don't belong, and only 30% read at grade level. At Empower Lit, we're changing that one school at a time. Through author visits, literacy camps, team publishing programs, and Cosmo the Alien on YouTube, we help kids discover confidence through storytelling. When you give a monthly donation, you're not just donating, you're helping a child believe in themselves, their words, and their worth. Join the mission at empowerlitnonprofit.org because belief is where every great story begins. All right, now back to the episode. Let's get into it. Yeah, that's a very true point. And showing that you care, listening to them, and not prying, but just being open are
Yeah,
great. I seem to have a. I'm still figuring out. Like I always say, like nobody cares more about your business than you. Like it's just
never.
you
Yeah,
can't get you can't like it's the same thing like with with my nonprofit is like, I don't care how many kids we're helping. Nobody cares about it as much as you that started it. And, and you have to, and I'm still figuring this out and learning about building that loyalty and building
Mhm.
that group of people that, especially with the nonprofit, because we're volunteers, including
Right,
myself. Right? There's
right.
right now we're not at that staff level, so it's like you really, this isn't paying anybody's bills. It's just like a feel good thing. So it's
Yeah.
so it's just
Well,
yeah.
well, one thing that I think hits also, and we is to try to find every opportunity to to show what the purpose is behind the work that you're doing. So if you have something that occurs, then you can say, hey, let's use this example and present this to some of the other folks so that they understand like this moment that we just experienced is why all of us are doing this. And it's important to kind of remind people that, hey, it's not just to do XYZ or to get you from A to B or yeah, we're going to pay you a little bit, this and that, especially when you're getting paid a little bit, right? You have to have
Right.
purpose and meaning behind what you do, or you
Yeah.
lose that really quickly. So that's another really key thing is to keep reminding people that there's a purpose behind what you're doing that far surpasses a me or a you or even an us. This is about doing something for other people, and let's stay focused on that so that when you start bitching about stuff that's happening to you that also happens to everyone else, and this is just life, you remember what your purpose is here. So that would help.
Speaking of purpose, it made me think of your book, Life in a Fishbowl. And if someone was listening to this that feels like they're stuck in their own fishbowl, and if you could please explain what that means to those that may not know, what mindset shift would you want them to take away from your story?
Well, life in the fishbowl, the actual fishbowl is that section of the neighborhood that cops deemed it the fishbowl because every time you
Right.
came in, you were under a microscope essentially. But to get out of those things, I think as I only can hope that most adults at some point, not all of them do. I think that's obvious in today's day and age, but you get to a point where you start seeing that real value in life comes from being able to give and enlighten other people or help them get from A to B. And I think that really is the easiest way to do it is to deflect and stop looking at yourself and whether it's woe is me or how am I supposed to fix
Mhm.
this? I'm in a rut, I'm in a thinking rut. Try to figure out something that you could do for someone else. And a lot of times that analogy might even help you fix your own because a lot of times we would never give ourselves the advice that we of course would give our friend that came to us, right? So that's much too difficult, but I would tell someone else to do it every day. So I think the more we can focus on saying, look, I'm grateful for where I'm at. Let me just try to do something good for someone else. I think that really is a benefit. And I know some people are in such a hole that they're not even really capable of doing that. But if you're not capable of actually giving of yourself because you're so flat, then it's just a matter of trying to identify things that you are grateful for because I promise you there's worse. And so, as long as you're trying not to compare yourself to the umpteenth successful person that you see every day, which a lot of us easily see all those success stories and they flash in front of
Mhm.
our faces all the time. We all make those comparisons. So you just gotta stay focused and stay in reality too. Get rid of the social media a little bit and try to have some perspective and be grateful for some of the things that you do have. I think it'll go a long way.
Actually didn't ask. When you finish this after 2 years, did you like take a vacation or something? I mean, like once it's all over.
Man, I try at the behest of my wife. I stayed on the department, but I actually tried to start another case similar, getting in with the Mexican mafia, and was actually driving to the coast and having shipments coming in to steal shipments that had a bunch of dope coming through and was going up through the city. So I had a little stuff cooking, but by then this other thing had gotten so much publicity that the
Oh.
department heads and stuff all wanted a piece of it. And the only reason this thing even worked was that I had my one boss that protected me and shielded me from the attention and I got it done. So I was so burnt out that I really just wanted to quit and do anything else. she talked me into staying. She said, "Look, be reasonable. Make sure this is what you want to do." And it was what I wanted to do. So,
How long
t-
did that take for you to realize, like, hey, this isn't, I'm transitioning out? And then
yeah.
how was that transition period for you? Did you know where you were going next? Is this when you started your company?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I went from one completely whack venture to another. I spent a year and essentially didn't feel any better. I just felt like this is not a job I want anymore. I'd lost motivation. I was so burnt out, and it had nothing to do with, it's a great job itself, but I think after what I experienced, nothing
Yeah.
could match that, and I knew that was unrealistic to keep being able to do that. And so yeah, I decided to jump off. And per our policy at the department at the time, you couldn't have a security or investigation company or anything going on the side, because out of fear that you'd be leveraging law enforcement resources to accomplish a private business goal. So I just decided to quit the PD with no leads and no licenses and forego the rest of my retirement. Most of my guys at the PD said, "Hey, I'll see you back here in 2 years," and I was like, "You're never going to see me again." And so, as most entrepreneurs, I dug in, and again, credit to my wife, because she's the only one that had steady work at the time while I was building this thing out, and she was still working with me on the business as well. So we're building this business, but she at least had steady income, because it took 18 months or so before we could pay ourselves anything. So went from one stressful venture to another, but it was completely different. It's just a totally different stress, and you would know that. People don't have an appreciation for undercover work any more than they do entrepreneurship. They think, hey, you just come up with a cool logo and you file a this and that, and then it's easy. But man, it's
No,
day
I
and night.
find it so, I just laugh every single time when I come across a social media post. They're a dime a dozen when they're like, you know, this is easy income and you could do this in two
Yeah.
seconds, and how I went from
Oh.
$0 to a million in 2 months. And I'm like,
Oh.
and then they're like, comment from the, like, put, you know, manual for comment manual. I'll send you the details. And every once in a while I will, because I'm curious. I'm like, what do they possibly, and then I'll read it and be like, what scam? Like, this isn't
Yep.
reality.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
why this is not true. And
This comes.
for me, it's so funny. I was just talking to somebody today and she was like, do you get stressed? And I'm like, I mean, we all get stressed, but I was like, but I'm really good at stress management. I like have an event on Saturday that's like projected to have 1,000 people there, and I'm doing this whole event by myself. And I'm like, you
Uh,
know, it could be stressful if you think about the whole picture. Like, as I talk about it, my chest tightens. But then I just go, like, I think about the one thing I have to do, and then suddenly, my chest isn't tightening anymore, right? But
mhm.
it's so funny because she said you get stressed. And then as you mentioned, like, I just love my job to start my new business, and I'm just saying to myself, that would have caused me stress. Like, that was
Yes. Of
it.
course. Of course. You got to
Yeah.
remember the purpose,
Yeah,
and then
that
try to remember, you're doing this outside of yourself, and there's no days off, and
no
you're
days
not even
off,
getting
and you don't
paid.
know where your income's gonna
Eh,
come. Like you mentioned,
uh-uh.
18 months, you don't know. And that's the thing. It's like, it's so funny because I'm a children's author, and I have a book that I post on TikTok almost every single day. Almost every single day. I have gotten 8 sales in the last 3 years of posting, and people are like, why do you still post? I'm like, one day it might take off, right? But the thing is,
Yeah.
I can't count on that one book to suddenly take off. It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
But I find it so funny though. You need that a relentless drive, you need that belief, you need that purpose, but at the same time, you know, there's no guarantee. And I think that's what makes the entrepreneur life, because there is a guarantee when you work for somebody that there is going to be a paycheck every
Right.
week, or bi-weekly or something like that, until you get let go or something happens. But it's something you can count on. When you are
Yeah.
your entrepreneur, like, you are your own boss, you're running your own business, it's like, am I going to be eating this week? And for you, it's like, you have a family. That's a different
Yes.
ball game, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. It is. And I think it really just comes down to bust your ass and work and get through it. I see all these people coming up with these ways to, here's how you start your business, and you set it and let it, and you're not going to have to work. And maybe at some point, that eventually could happen. But if you don't plan on just working your ass off for the first several years, at least, I mean, that's why 90% of these businesses don't make it. Hello, there's a reason why. And if you're trying to get into a business and start by just borrowing other people's money and paying yourself, then you've already missed the whole point. And I
Yeah.
think that's why a lot of them do fail. So you just got to be ready to pull the bootstraps and do it. It's not for everybody, though. Deciding
It's
not to go
not.
into business is okay.
How are you liking it? How did you like the choice, and how did you stick with it? Was there any point where you were like, "I don't know if this is gonna work out," and if so, like, how did you just keep pushing through?
Same airplane theory. That's how I stuck in it because
Okay.
I didn't have a plan B. I just had this is going to work.
Mhm.
And I did have, especially in the first year I did make money. We got a couple of clients that were very high paying, high level protection clients. And within 18 months of getting those, they were both stolen by 12, 13 employees, plus the clients starting their own thing and conspiring against us and then saying, you're fired. And then all these people quit. And then they start their own company and steal your contracts away. So,
Oh my
yes,
gosh.
yeah, I still have on the far west side of town 12 shallow graves reserved. But I had to learn how to trust people, and I had to, because if you're going to hire people, you have to then hire and trust. You can't hire and micromanage to try to keep yourself from getting screwed again.
Right.
But we literally just started making money and paying these people very well, by the way. We paid our employees really well for these. And they all fell apart. Obviously, both of those things fell apart in far less than a year because, they don't know how to run a business. They just think they have
Right.
some kind of thing in their mind. But
They
since
think it's
I've
easy. You make it look easy. That's
yeah,
the
they
thing.
want to sit behind a desk and direct people. No, it's
Yeah.
not that. I've
Yeah.
even helped people. I've mentored people, even ex-employees, into the same type of business because you have to learn how to trust people again.
How do
Learn how
you
to
do it?
take
How did
lessons
how
from
did you
those.
learn how to trust again?
That took a little while because this was really, really, really an emotional aggravation, and we were
Yeah.
pissed. But we had to you decide you're going to be in that business or not, and it's not even that type of business. It's you have to trust people or quit what you're doing because you're hiring people to help you accomplish something and you can't just again you don't have if I had 70 employees and tried to micromanage each one, I'd be more miserable than I was on day one of the startup. I mean, you can't do that, and nobody's happy with that anyway. So ultimately,
Yeah.
it's just focusing on the end goal. What are you trying to accomplish? And the main lesson I took from that, I tell people too, is that if this was 98% their fault, obviously they're crooks, they stole, they have no couth, they have no ethics and whatever. What is the 2%? What is the 5%? What are the things that you could have done better, not only to prevent it, but to do a better job in preventing people from even thinking that that is an option? And so I think that's taken us a long way. That's the fact that we survived that, started the company 3 months before the stock crash in
That's impressive.
2008.
The fact that you
Yeah.
not just survived it, but thrived like,
Yeah.
that's impressive. That's very
Yeah.
impressive. Yeah.
And it's a hard lesson. It didn't kill us, but it was a hard lesson. But I think that's why it was so impactful, and we were so resilient because as long as it took us to find our way, that was a really staunch lesson in trying to look inward. Because looking outward, it was just trying to figure out what weapon you wanted to use when you fill those graves. Looking inward just means, hey, I have to be responsible for some of this somehow. And even if it's a small amount, let's figure out how to fix it and move on. So that's how you build.
I always say it's better to get it out of the way early on. Like
Yes.
get it on the way early on. I'm big into like fail forward, fail quick, and that way
Hmm.
we can, because then you realize like when other speedboats gone, like we had, oh my goodness, it's gonna bother me. Oh, a perfect push up. Former
Hmm.
Navy SEAL on the show.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. He was amazing. He was
I have perfect push up to this day. I mean, those were sell and sell a long time ago. I use them all the time. Yeah.
I used to have them too. Okay, so they went through bankruptcy like twice or something like that, 2 or 3 times.
Really.
Yeah, and he talked about it on the show, and I was like, and he's like, the first time we went through bankruptcy. And then he talked about how he got through it. And then he goes, and then after the second and third time, it's like, well, we got through it that one time. We'll get through it again. Right.
Now you
And
know the ride. Yeah.
now you know the ride. And it was just interesting to hear and listen to. And I just, great episode, by the way. It was a good business episode because I was like, again, you go through something like that and you realize the next time it comes around or something similar comes around, it's like, I can get through it, right? We're gonna
Yeah.
get there.
It's proven. You've experienced,
Yeah.
persevering. So you know that you can do it. Even if it's another low percentage battle, you know that it's doable as opposed to going in it the first time. You have no clue and you're going into with so much frustration and everything else. I'd love to see that episode. I'll go find it.
Yeah, I'll send it. I'll send it. It was a good one. This was so fun. I mean, I'm so intrigued by this life that you lived. And like, it's so interesting. I just
Oh,
definitely need to get that movie out there, or at least the show. It would be a cool like mini series, like an 8-episode
yeah.
mini series. That's
Yeah.
because I
Be
feel like
better.
there's a lot of stories, and we would be getting to know the different characters that you've
Yes.
got to know, and then it kind of reminds me of like like when you watch that movie Coach Carter, and then you get to see at the end like what happened to them, like where they went. But with
Yeah.
you, it'd be this 8-part mini series because now
Yep.
we got to actually. And the cool thing that I think would be really interesting that you mentioned is like it would humanize people a bit instead of us just seeing them as this bad
Crim-
human being, right? This
yep.
criminal, right? And it'll humanize them. And I just I don't know. I think that would be an interesting miniseries. You got to get that out there. Yeah.
Yes, I'm working on it, and you have it spot on. That's exactly what the concept. We started writing it as a movie before COVID hit, and that's what blew all that deal up. But
Yes, I
that was the whole premise, is to make it like a Wire, because my emotional split is the same thing I would want an audience. I would want to be like, I know Tegan's the good guy, but man, I really want that guy to get away with this because I don't want to see him go down. Because that's the way I felt. So I would
yeah.
love for it to be told that way. And you're right. Now that they have all these long form TV series, that's exactly the way to do
A
it. You
little
paint,
miniseries. I think
yeah,
that'd be
good
great.
pictures of the bad guys as people. That's exactly right. You're spot on there.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think that the humanity these days, it's getting a little lost, and just being able to have compassion and grace and all that stuff. That's and I appreciate you being so real with me on the show, talking about that because it's not something that well, first of all, no one's brought this type of story to the show before, but I really liked the emotion that you brought. And I forgot the final question I have to ask you. What can we do on an everyday basis? What do you have for our listeners on an everyday basis that we can do to strengthen our mindset to tackle those everyday challenges that come our way?
I think you need to focus on things outside of yourself, because there are so many things in life that are out of our control that
Mhm.
we get hyper focused on those things. And then that's where we get really overwhelmed. So we need to focus on the things that we can control, and also see even one step beyond and try to figure out ways that, even if it's just I'm going to send a text to somebody or something, to
Yeah.
try to just spur the mind in a way that says life is not all about me and that I can focus on somebody else. I think therapeutic wise, it's great, but it also will become a habit that in over a period of time, you'll really stay focused on your purpose and what you're really doing what for.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you so much for being on the show. You're amazing.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I really appreciate you asking me.
Of course. Yeah. And everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member for those extra goodies that only our Substack member get. Go read the chapter of the book, and I'll see you guys all next Wednesday.